Hello, so this is the career assessment for careers in criminal justice. First off, I just want to start by saying that when I first took this class, I had no idea there was this many jobs in criminal justice, and I also am a new criminology major, and so it was extremely eye-opening, extremely interesting to see all these different job opportunities and career pathways that I could take and see the ones that I could probably fit in and maybe the ones that I wouldn't be such a good fit in. So to start, a little bit about me. I want to be a lawyer when I'm older. I already knew that coming into this course. So of course the court system was something that I really held on to really tightly, and I think the attributes that I have line up most closely with those that Johnston mentioned. But we'll jump into all of them and kind of discuss all of them. So the first one is law enforcement, and it goes law enforcement, courts, and then corrections. And I think that's a very important kind of timeline to go through, because law enforcement is the front end, and then courts is the process in the middle, and then corrections is the final step for somebody that's going through the criminal justice system in the United States. So the first one is law enforcement, and it's an extremely broad field. And as quoted by Johnston in chapter 3 of our book, law enforcement field refers to agencies or individuals that are responsible for the maintain of public order and public safety in enforcing our criminal laws. One thing that I found really interesting about this quote was the fact that it didn't mention civil laws. It only mentioned criminal. But people can, law enforcement can also enforce civil laws, and there are things like noise complaints or something. There are noise ordinances that are not necessarily criminal but civil. So I thought that was interesting that Johnston kind of left that one out. But two jobs that I want to highlight in this field, and they're very, very different jobs. Sometimes I feel like they're not even in the same field, are police officers and a criminal investigator for the FBI. And obviously both of them, the candidates must have great attributes. The history must be very clean, relatively clean. But there are some specific things that are different for a police officer and criminal investigator. So as we kind of learned in class when the Gainesville Police Department, or UFPD, spoke to us, a police officer must possess great resolve. They should be able to think innovatively and quickly in high-stress situations, and always trying to kind of bring down the situation and not escalate it anymore. So really trying to use those de-escalation tactics. A criminal investigator for the FBI is a little different because it must have a lot more schooling than a police officer, or usually they do. They must have a specialization in some sort of area. It's slightly more technical and more bureaucratic, so that's kind of why that education comes into play. And they must possess great leadership skills and outstanding moral character. And for the court system, and to me, solely on my opinion, this is by far the most interesting and complex system, but the court system is the backbone of American justice. And I mean, when you go back all the way to how our country was made, the court system was there. And it's viewed as the protector of American justice, as Johnston quoted in chapter 6. And two of the jobs that I chose is attorney, because I want to be one, and then judge as well. Both judges and attorneys must have extensive schooling. So after you go for your 4 years, you are going to have to go for another 3 years to law school. However, on top of that, judges must have and do require extensive experience in being an attorney, in being a litigator, or just any position that you hold in the criminal justice system to really be a kind of competitive candidate. So for kind of attributes that I think I fit in pretty well, a judge must have the utmost moral resolve and try to stay away from those sentencing disparities. They must be well educated, have extensive experience like I mentioned, and respected in the community due to it being an appointed or voted in position. And Johnston didn't explicitly state this in our textbook, but I thought it was really interesting because she talked about how judges are kind of members of the community, and they talked about the voting process in for a judge. So obviously they must have to be well respected in the community for them to actually be voted in. And then kind of on the same lines, an attorney must have excellent communication skills, possibly more attuned than a judge, just because they are speaking every day in the courts. They must have analytical capabilities and be proactive instead of reactive, because you never want an attorney to react to something and never be prepared for something. You always want them to be prepared and be proactive in the process. And then the last step of the criminal justice system, very extremely important step that I think sometimes gets downplayed, is corrections. Corrections is the back end of the criminal justice system, like I said. So once a person is sentenced to jail or prison, correction officers preside over the people and they supervise them. However, most people think it just stops there, but like Johnston quoted in our textbook, being a prison guard or being in the corrections field is so much more than that. It's more than just making sure prisoners do not escape. It's making sure that prisoners are safe. It's making sure that everyone's accounted for. And so that's an extremely important job. Two jobs in that field, in the corrections field, are the state correctional officers and county jailers. Requirements for both these jobs are fairly similar to others. You need to have a good moral character. Schooling is not necessarily required for these jobs, but experience in kind of parallel or similar fields is wanted or usually required. Physical exams are required, kind of health exams, things like that. One thing I found super interesting about this that I didn't know was that this requires not the physical aspect and physical aptitude, but the physical aspect and how you look. So height and weight are they're taken into a factor when you do get hired for this job. So obviously I'm not able to stop a 300, 200 pound man. It just wouldn't happen. So height and weight is a factor in this job. So yeah, so those are 6 of the jobs that we highlighted, and I think my attributes fit most closely with becoming a lawyer, and I can't wait to kind of go over these jobs and see them all work out in the future.